They say some places don't just hold memories, they devour souls. We thought we were just chasing a thrill in room 13 of Blackwood Grand Hotel. But what we found there wasn't just a ghost story. It was a mirror reflecting our deepest fears. And a twisted promise that some guests never truly check out.
It started as most of our bad ideas did, with a dare. Not a childish, double-dogged kind of dare, but the kind whispered in the dark corners of a late-night diner. Fueled by lukewarm coffee and an insatiable hunger for the unknown. We were Alex, that's me, the one foolish enough to narrate this descent into madness. Ben, the perpetual skeptic whose bravado was as thick as his skull. Chloe, our tech-savvy oracle who believed in data over ghosts, but was always ready for a good scare, and David, the nervous one, whose wide eyes and trembling hands were a constant, endearing counter to our collective recklessness. We were urban explorers, thrill seekers, and connoisseurs of the creepy, always chasing the next adrenaline rush, the next story to tell around a flickering campfire. Our current obsession, the one that had us huddled over a greasy map, was Blackwood Grand Hotel. Legends clung to it like the moss on its crumbling stone walls. Built in the late 1800s, it had once been a grand retreat for the wealthy, a place of opulence and whispered scandals. But then, the stories began. Disappearances, inexplicable deaths, guests found raving mad, muttering about unseen horrors in room 13. The hotel had been abandoned for decades, a skeletal monument to forgotten terrors, its reputation growing darker with each passing year. Locals avoided their faces paling at the mere mention of its name. For us, it was an irresistible siren song. Room 13, I announced, my voice a little too loud in the quiet diner, drawing a few curious glances from the lone waitress. They say no one has ever spent a full night in room 13 and left unchanged. Ben scoffed, please, Alex. It's an old building. Creaks, drafts, maybe a few rats. Nothing a good flashlight and a healthy dose of common sense can't handle. Buteven, he had that glint in his eye, the one that betrayed his secret excitement. Chloe, already tapping away on her tablet, pulled up old newspaper clippings and grainy forum posts. The reports are consistent, though. Cold spots, disembodied voices, objects moving, and a recurring theme of extreme psychological distress. She looked up, a mischievous grin playing on her lips. Sounds like a challenge. David, predictably, swallowed hard. Guys, are we sure about this? My Aunt Scosen's friend said her uncle worked there before it closed, and he swore he saw things. His voice trailed off, his eyes darting nervously around the diner as if the ghosts of Blackwood Grand were already lurking in the shadows. But the decision was already made. The thrill of the forbidden, the allure of proving ourselves against the unknown, was too strong. We were going to spend the night in Blackwood Grand Hotel. In room 13, the anticipation was a tangible thing, a buzzing energy that filled the air between us. It was a mix of giddy excitement and april, unsettling fear. We spent the next few days preparing, gathering our gear, high-powered flashlights, extra batteries, a first aid kit just in case, and Chloe's arsenal of paranormal investigation equipment, an EMF meter, a digital voice recorder for EVBs, and a couple of night vision cameras. We researched every scrap of information we could find about the hotel, poring over old blueprints and chilling anecdotes. Each new detail, each whispered warning, only intensified our resolve. We were crossing a line, we knew it. A line between the mundane and the truly terrifying. And we couldn't wait. The drive to Blackwood Grand was a journey into isolation. The paved road soon gave way to a gravel track, then a barely discernible dirt path swallowed by ancient, gnarled trees that clawed at the darkening sky. The last vestiges of civilization, The distant glow of streetlights vanished behind us, replaced by an oppressive, inky blackness. The air grew heavy, thick with the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves. The silence was profound, broken only by the crunch of our tires and the Nerval shader that slowly died down to hushed whispers. It felt like we were driving not just into the wilderness, but into another time, another dimension. Then, through a break in the trees, it appeared. Black Veil Grand. It didn't just stand there. It loomed, a monstrous silhouette against the bruised twilight sky. Its Gothic architecture, once grand, was now a testament to decay. Turrets reached like skeletal fingers, broken windows stared out like vacant eyes, and the entire structure seemed to sag under the weight of its own dark history. Overgrown ivy clung to its crumbling stone facade, a verdant shroud attempting to reclaim what man had abandoned. A rusted retired gate, half off its hinges, groaned in the wind, a mournful welcome. The silence around it was absolute, a heavy blanket that muffled even the sounds of our own breathing. We killed the engine, and the sudden quiet was deafening. A shiver, not entirely from the cold, ran down my spine. It felt like the hotel was watching us, assessing us, waiting. Stepping out of the car, the air was noticeably colder, even though the evening had been mild. A faint metallic temps hung in the air, like old blood. The grounds were a tangle of thorny bushes and dead weeds, the once manicured gardens now a wild, untamed mess. The front door, a massive slab of dark wood, stood slightly ajar as I finned vitting. US in, or perhaps daring us. Ben pushed it open with a creak that echoed through the cavernous entrance hall. The lobby was a mausoleum of foreboding grandeur. Dust motes danced in the faint light filtering through the grimy windows, illuminating antique furniture draped in ghostly white sheets like shrouded corpses. The air was stagnant, thick with the smell of mildew and something else, something gendifinal and unsettling, like old secrets. "Hello," I called out, my voice swallowed by the vastness of the space. No answer, just the oppressive silence. Then, from behind a towering, dust-covered counter that must have once been the reception desk, a figure slowly emerged. An old man, his fascia roadmap of wrinkles, his eyes a startling pale blue that seemed to see right through us. He moved with a slow, deliberate grace that was unnerving. He didn't speak, just stared, his gaze unnervingly intense. We have a reservation," Close hammered, holding up her phone with a screenshot of our fake booking. The old man's lips twitched, a hint of a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He slowly reset for a massive, leather-bound ledger, its pages yellowed with age. His finger, gnarled and bony, traced a line down the page until it stopped. Room 13. His voice like dry leaves skittering across pavement. He looked up, his pallies fixing on us, a strange, knowing glint in their depths. It wasn't a look of surprise, but of grim expectation. He handed me a heavy, ornate key, its metal cold against my palm. "Enjoy your stay," he said, the words dripping with an irony that made my skin crawl. The walk to room 13 was a pilgrimage through forgotten time. The corridor was long, dimly lit by flickering ancient bulbs that cast dancing shadows on the peeling wallpaper. Each step echoed, amplified by the oppressive silence. The air grew colder with every footfall, a palpable chill that seeped into our bones. Room 13 was at the very end, a dark, imposing door that seemed to absorb the meager light. As I turned a heavy key in the lock, a groan resonated from within, as if the room itself was protesting our intrusion. The door swung open, revealing a space-shrouded, imperpetual twilight. Dust lay thick on every surface, a silent testament to years of neglect. The furniture, heavy and ornate, was covered in more white sheets, giving the room the appearance of a macabre exhibition. But it wasn't just the dust or the decay that made my breath catch. It was the feeling, a heavy, suffocating presence that pressed down on us, a cold, unseen hand that seemed to grip my very soul. This wasn't just an old room. It was a living, breathing entity, and it knew we were here. We were its new guests, and something told me it wasn't planning on letting you sleep easily. We set up our gear, a futile attempt to impose order on the chaos we instinctively knew was coming. Chloe meticulously placed her cameras, their red recording lights blinking like watchful eyes in the gloom. Ben, ever the pragmatist, checked the windows and the door, as if a physical barrier could keep out what we were truly hard to find. David, pale and quiet, huddled in a corner, clutching a crucifix he'd brought from home. I just stood there, the key to room 13 still cold in my hand, feeling the oppressive weight of the silence. It wasn't an empty silence. It was a pregnant one, filled with unspoken threats. The first few hours were deceptively calm. We tried to make light of it, cracking nervous jokes, but the words felt hollow, swallowed by the room. Then the subtle disturbances began. A sudden, inexplicable drop in temperature in one corner of the room, so localized it felt like stepping into a freezer. A faint whisper like dry leaves skittering across a forgotten floor, just at the edge of hearing. We exchanged glances, trying to dismiss it. Just the old building settling, Ben mumbled, but his eyes darted nervously. A floorboard creaked in the hallway, a slow, deliberate sound as Efsomion was walking past our door. We froze, listening. Nothing. Just the heavy silence returning, but the occurrences escalated, shedding their subtlety like a snake sheds its skin. The flickering lights started, not just a momentary dimming, but a frantic strobe lightens that made the shadows writhe and twist into grotesque shapes. A book, a heavy leather-bound tome, slid off a dusty shelf in the corner and landed with a thud that echoed like a gunshot in the stillness. We all jumped, our hearts hammering against our ribs. "Did anyone touch that?" Chloe asked, her voice tight with a fierce rarely showed. No one had. Then the personal encounters began. Ben, the unwavering skeptic, was the first. He was fiddling with his EMF meter, trying to get a reading, when he suddenly stiffened. "Did you guys hear that?" he whispered, his face ashen. "Someone just called my name. Right next to my ear." We hadn't heard anything. Chloe checked her audio recorder, but it only picked up static. Later, as Chloe was reviewing some footage, she gasped. "Look." She pointed at the screen. For a fleeting second, a dark, indistinct Tao seemed to glide past the window, even though we were on the third floor. Anthea was nothing outside but the gnarled branches of an ancient oak. David, who had been trying to distract himself by playing a game on his phone, suddenly cried out. Head dropped his phone, his hand flying to his arm. Something touched me, Hestamord, his eyes wide with terror. It was so cold, like ice. We saw thigus bumps rising on his skin, a testament to the unseen touch. Room 13 itself seemed to become more alive, more malevolent. The feeling of being watched intensified, a palpable pressure on our chests. The air grew heavy, thick with a suffocating dread that made it hard to breathe. The temperature plummeted, and our breath plumed in the frigid air, even though the windows were closed. It felt like you were trapped in a freezer, but the cold was an internal one, a chill that seeped into her very bones. The auditory phenomena became clearer, more distinct and infinitely more terrifying. Faint cries, like a child weeping, seemed to emanate from the walls themselves. Distorted laughter, a chilling guttural sound, echoed from the empty hallway. Anthon the footsteps, heavy, dragging. Footsteps directly above us, even though we were on the top floor. They would pace back and forth, sometimes stopping directly over our heads, as if whatever was up there was listening, waiting. We tried to rationalize it, but the sounds were too deliberate to real disturbances. Brief, fleeting glimpses of figures in our peripheral vision. Shadows that seemed to detach themselves from the walls and move independently, swirling and coalescing into vaguely human shapes before dissipating. The mirror's nth room became a Pleciding source of dread. We'd catch our reflections, but for a split second, something else would be there. A gaunt, distorted face peering back, its eyes shallow and black. We were no longer just guests in room 13. We were its captive audience, and the show was just beginning. The flickering lights, the disembodied voices, the cold touches, it was all too much. David was on the verge of a full-blown panic attack, and even Ben's skepticism was cracking under the relentless assault of the inexplicable. After a particularly violent shudder ran through the entire room, rattling the windows and sending a vase crashing to the floor, we knew we couldn't just sit there and be terrorized. "All right," Chloe said, her voice surprisingly steady, though her hands trembled slightly as she adjusted her glasses. "We're not leaving without answers. Let's get scientific." We transformed room 13 into a makeshift paranormal investigation lab. Chloe, with her methodical precision, set up her night vision cameras in every corner, ensuring full coverage. The EMF meter, a sleek black device, was placed on the dusty bedside table, its needle twitching erratically even before we began. We laid out the EVP recorder, a small, unassuming box that promised to capture the whispers of the dead. The air was thick with a new kind of tension, not just fear, but a desperate, almost reckless determination. "Is anyone here with us?" I asked, my voice echoing strangely in the room. "If you are, please give us a sign." We waited, holding our breath. Nothing. Just the hum of Chloe's equipment and the frantic pounding of our own hearts. Ben, ever the provocateur, tried a different approach. "Come on, if you're so powerful, show you something real. Don't just hide in the shadows." Still nothing. The silence stretched, mocking us. Then the EMF meter spiked. Violently, the needle shot into the red, a piercing wind emanating from the device. It was focused on the far corner of the room, near an old moth-eaten armchair. The air in that spot grew impossibly cold, and a faint, sickly sweet smell, like decaying flowers, filled my nostrils. Chloe quickly aimed a camera at the area, and Ben cautiously approached with a thermal imager. The screen showed a distinct human-shaped cold spot, hovering just above the armchair. It wasn't undeniable, terrifyingly real. "Can you tell us your name?" Chloe whispered into the EVP recorder, her voice barely audible. We listened back, the static a harsh backdrop to our strained breathing. Then, a faint, distorted sound, like a sigh, followed by something that sounded like Eliza. It was barely there, a ghostly whisper, but it was enough. Our blood ran cold. We had a name, driven by a morbid curiosity. We started searching the room more thoroughly, underneath a loose floorboard near the armchair. I found it a small leather-bound diary, its pages brittle with age. The handwriting was delicate, faded, but legible. It belonged to an Eliza, a young woman who had been a guest in room 13 over a century ago. Her entries spoke of a forbidden love, a jealous husband, and a tragic, violent end within the very walls of this room. She had been murdered, her body hidden, her spirit trapped. As we read, the room grew colder, the whispers louder. The spirits, Eliza's spirit, became agitated. The EMF meter screamed, and objects began to fly across the room. A lamp shattered. Against the wall, a heavy curtain rod crashed down, narrowly missing Ben. The air crackled with a malevolent energy. The faint, distorted voice from the EV recorder was no longer a whisper. It was a guttural growl filled with rage and despair. "Get out," it shrieked, a sound that seemed to tear at the very fabric of the room. We had found the truth, and the truth had awakened something truly terrifying. We were no longer just investigating. We were being hunted. The air in room 13 became a living, breathing entity, pressing down on us, suffocating Giss. The growl that had shrieked, "Get out!" reverberated through our very bones, a sound that was both auditory and visceral. The poltergeist activity intensified into a maelstrom of chaos. Furniture overturned, glass shattered, and the very walls seemed to breathe, expanding and contracting as if the room itself was alive and enraged. A dark, swirling vortex of shadow coalesced in the corner where we had found Elissa's diary, growing denser, more defined, until 2 pinpricks of malevolent red light ignited within its depths. It wasn't a fleeting glimpse or a peripheral shadow. It was awful, undeniable apparition, a towering, formless mass of pure malice that radiated Annecy dread. "Run!" Chloe screamed, her voice raw with terror. We didn't need to be told twice. All thoughts of equipment, of evidence, of scientific inquiry vanished in the face-off-sock overwhelming, primal fear. We scrambled, tripping over fallen debris, our hearts shammering against our ribs like trapped birds. The door to room 13, which had seemed so imposing on our arrival, now felt like a beacon of salvation. We burst out tento the dimly lit corridor, not daring to look back, the chilling laughter of the unseen showing behind us. The hotel seemed to fight our escape. The corridor screeched engines, the flickering lights plunging us into momentary darkness, the floorboards groaning as if trying to trip us. We stumbled down the grand staircase, its once elegant banister now a blur of splintered wood, and burst through the massive front doors, gasping for breath into the pre-dawn chill. We didn't stop until we reached the car, piling in, fumbling with the keys, the engines puttering to life like a dying beast. As Ben floored the accelerator, sending gravel sprying, we looked back at Black Veil Grand. It stood there, a silent monstro sentinel, its broken windows like empty eyes watching our retreat. The first slivers of dawn were painting the sky in hues of bruised purple and gray, and the hotel, in that fading darkness, looked even more menacing. A monument to the horrors we had just escaped. We drove in stunned silence for what felt like hours, the rising sun doing little to dispel lingering shadows in our minds. The initial thrill-seeking, the bravado, the hunger for the unknown. It was all gone, replaced by a profound, bone-deep understanding, something truly terrifying. We talked, eventually, in hushed, trembling voices, recounting what we had seen, heard, and felt. We tried to rationalize it, to find logical explanations, but there was none. The cold spots, the voices, the flying objects, the apparition, Eliza's diary, it was all too real, too undeniable. Our world, once neatly compartmented into the explainable and the unexplainable, had been irrevocabulated. The supernatural wasn't just a concept, was a terrifying, tangible force. As we finally hit the main highway, the familiar world slowly reasserting itself, he glanced in the rearview mirror. The sun was fully up now, casting long shadows behind us. I expected to see the Black Veil Grand Hotel, still looming, still menacing, but it wasn't there. Instead, where the sprawling Gothic structure should have been, stood a perfectly normal modern motel, its neon sign cheerfully proclaiming welcome travelers. Shiver ran down my spine, colder than anything I'd felt in room 13. E blinked, rubbed my eyes, and looked again. Still the motel. I must be exhausted, I thought, my mind playing tricks on me. But then, as I lowered my gaze to the reflection in the car window, I saw them. Ben, Chloe, and David. They were sitting in the back, their faces pale, their eyes wide and vacant, staring straight ahead. Their lips were parted in a faint, unsettling smile, and their eyes were empty, devoid of the fear, the exhaustion, the life that had been there just moments before. And then, From somewhere deep within my own mind, a faint, distorted whisper echoed. A familiar voice, yet not my own. A voice that seemed to be coming from everywhere and nowhere at once. "Welcome home, Alex." The words were soft, insidious, and utterly chilling. I gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles white, my breath catching in my throat. I looked at my hands, then at the reflection of my own face in the window. My eyes, too, were wide and vacant, and a faint, unsettling smile was playing on my lips. The dare had not ended when well after room 13. It had only just begun. And I was no longer sure who or what was driving the car.